All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you are not a member of the press, please log out and watch today's live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page, or tune in to 900 AM or 96.1 FM WURD. We will begin our briefing with remarks by Mayor Jim Kenney. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thanks, Kevin, and good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. During today's press conference, we have several updates we want to share with you. First, as we continue to confront the violence plaguing our communities, I want to address the fact that this past week has been especially difficult with so many senseless shootings. Every act of gun violence is an unspeakable tragedy. The fact that our city has lost 300 souls to date this year is devastating. As mayor, our administration's number one priority is to keep people safe and protect our residents. The surging gun violence that we've seen in our city and cities across the country pains us all. My deepest condolences go out to the loved ones of all those affected by this senseless violence. We spent these past few years confronting the rising epidemic and doing everything in our power, not only to stop it, but to try to continue to better understand, why the violence continues. As we take action to identify and implement solutions to this issue, we continue to call upon our partners to work together with us to create the safety Philadelphians need and deserve. Given the stakes and the lives at hand, we implore everyone from elected officials to community members to work together and find solutions to solve this deeply complex issue. The fact remains that there are too many guns on our streets with devastating consequences. That's why we're also advocating to the public and in the courts about the state's dereliction of its duty and the gun lobby's role in fueling the deaths in our city and in cities across the country. Until we address the availability and ease of access to firearms, we'll always be fighting an uphill battle. The police department is investigating these crimes, and they continue to take a record number of illegal firearms off our streets, but they need the public's help to solve these crimes. I urge anyone with information about heinous acts of violence to report anonymously to 215-686-TIPS so we can prevent needless violence that is tearing our communities apart. That's 215-686-TIPS. In a few moments, Erica Atwood, Senior Director, Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety, will also provide updates on just some of our violence prevention and intervention efforts. She'll walk you through a recent partnership between the city's Office of Community Reentry Partnerships and the Community College of Philadelphia regarding a community expungement pardon clinic and resource fair, and some of the results from that initiative. Last week, we announced the 5th cohort of Targeted Community Investment Grantees, and she'll share more information on this program and the new grantees shortly. Before I turn it over to Erica, I also want to share more promising news. Right on the heels of Congress finally passing gun safety legislation for the first time in more than 30 years, President Biden has also signed more than 20 executive actions to reduce gun violence across the country. A few members of our administration represented Philadelphia at the White House last week where these actions were signed, which cover everything from keeping dangerous weapons and repeat shooters off the streets to addressing the root causes of gun violence by committing to major investments in workforce development. These actions represent progress, but we know we still need to do more and act urgently to combat the crisis. Now, for more information on updates and initiatives in the works from the city's Office of Criminal Justice and Public Safety, I'm going to turn it over to Senior Director Erica Atwood. Erica?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mayor Kenney. This week, I'd really like to highlight a successful instance of collaboration that the mayor mentioned with the community for CJPS. This weekend, the Office of Reentry Partnerships, Community College of Philadelphia hosted a community expungement and pardon clinic and resource fair. The clinic and resource fair was for community members searching for ways to remove guilty or not guilty convictions from their public records. Philadelphians could attend and speak with a lawyer or a supervised law student who will review their specific case and provide customized legal advice for them to follow. The fair was hosted at Community College's Northwest Regional Center and was a massive success. We had over 300 Philadelphians attend the event, with over 150 of them receiving legal advice. Beyond the clinic and the resource fair, there was a block party that was open to the public, and community members could kind of be together with food, water ice, bouncy houses for the kids, and music throughout the duration of the clinic. We're going to continue to look forward to future partnerships with Community College of Philadelphia and other community organizations. And our goal is to meet Philadelphians where they are. And this event shows that when we partner with organizations that are relevant and connected to our communities, we see participation and engagement on a large scale. It is critical that we provide these types of programs so we can reduce recidivism, help individuals have a path to economic mobility and a connection to purpose so they can lead a life disconnected from violence. CJPS is also excited to announce our 5th cohort of targeted community investment grantees. These grants fund community-based violence prevention programs and activities that improve public safety, increase opportunities for self-development and care, and build a stronger sense of community throughout neighborhoods most impacted by violence. 45 organizations will be awarded grants ranging from $1,200 to $50,000. Of these 45 grantees, 38 are new to the Targeted Community Investment Grant Program. And to better support all of our grantees, we have updated our payment process in the following ways. One, funding is split into 3 payments. The first payment will be distributed at the beginning of the cohort. Grantees will receive the remaining 2 payments throughout the remainder of the cohort, with submissions of the appropriate kind of documentation and paperwork. Additionally, we've made the forms for the grant disbursement easier for grantees to complete and submit. The 5th cohort of our targeted community investment grants will run from July through September. Next, I would like to make a leadership update for our criminal justice and public safety cluster. We are extremely excited to announce Asada Thomas as the executive director for our Office of Reentry Partnerships. Asada has over 2 decades of experience in the social service sector, specifically in the world of corrections and reentry. Asada is now serves as the chair of the Philadelphia Reentry Coalition. We are thrilled to have someone who is really focused on looking to her leadership and focused on kind of what we want to do to reduce recidivism and connect those who have been impacted by the carceral system to supports and opportunities to reduce those reduce the negative impacts of the criminal justice system. And now, lastly, if we could put up the slide. I would like to remind everyone that we have been talking about the replicating Chicago's Successful Ready program. We are going to we have posted our community violence intervention RFP. We are looking for participants in the program to receive up to 3 years of intensive and ongoing supports, including job training, housing supports, and mental health guidance. For more information about this RFP and how to apply, applicants can head over to the city's e-contract database. If you follow the link that is provided, https://bit.ly/bit.ly/3P9E05U. And search for contract opportunity 21220623122247. Responses are due August 26th by 5 p.m. With that, I will hand it over to Deputy Commissioner Dales for the police department updates.
Thank you, Erica. Good morning, everyone. Before I get into my presentation, showing the most recent statistics that we're seeing in our city, I would like to briefly acknowledge that we have seen some harrowing incidents of violence in our city since we last met. I want to assure the public that the Philadelphia Police Department is utilizing all the resources available to ensure that we not only apprehend offenders, but that we also proactively and appropriately police the communities we serve so that we can get ahead of the crime and intervene before a shooting or a homicide occurs. There is not a single issue that is more important to this department than the safety of those who live, work, and visit Philadelphia. I encourage the community to engage with the officers in their neighborhood, talk to them, give them information on where you are seeing concerning activity. Although we do everything in our power to make sure that we are addressing issues in progress and before they arise, the reality is that we don't know everything. And there's a good chance you know something that we don't. So let's keep those lines of communication open. If you don't feel comfortable talking to an officer on the beat, reach out to your district captain or call the district to make a roll call complaint. If you would like to submit information regarding suspicious, nuisance, and criminal activity to the Philadelphia Police Department, please call our anonymous tip line at 215-686-TIPS. I will now shift gears and give a quick update on our recent crime statistics. Kev, can you focus slide, please? Next slide. Okay, I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart, year to date as of July 17th of this year, Philadelphia had 297 homicides and 1,306 shooting victims. In comparison to last year, homicides are down 2%, 297 this year versus 304 last year, and shooting victims are up 5%, 1,306 this year versus 1,249 last year. As of yesterday, homicides are down 1% and shooting victims are up 4%. Looking at the bottom left of the chart, it shows the motives for the homicides, which they remain the same. Number 1, arguments, 2, drugs, and 3, domestic. And currently the homicide clearance rate is now at 45%. Next slide, please. In this line graph, the blue line represents homicides and the orange line represents shooting victims in the pinpoint grids. If you look at the right side of the graph, you will see that as of July 17th, homicides are down 7% and shooting victims are down 7% in the pinpoint grids when comparing 2022 year-to-date totals with 2021. In reference to the homicides, the year-to-date percentage change comparison was flat for the past 2 weeks at negative 11%. From the week of June 27th through the week of July 4th. This period from July 11th to July 17th shows a slight increase to negative 7%. In reference to the shooting victims, the year-to-date percentage change comparison was relatively flat for the past 4 weeks. Next slide, please. So as of July 18th, 3,318 crime guns were seized in our city, which is 538 more crime guns that were seized since the last press rip, which was held on June 22nd. Next slide, please. Lastly, in reference to the privately made firearms, also known as ghost guns, that were seized in our city, year to date as of July 18th, we are now at 306. And with that, I will now turn it over to Chief Inspector Frank Benor, who is the Chief Inspector of the Detective Bureau, and he will speak about cases we wish to highlight. Frank?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm going to talk about some homicides initially this week, or this period particularly. Homicide made 10 arrests and obtained 1 warrant for homicides that occurred this past year. A couple of homicides were very significant with arrest, and the media covered them. I just want to review. One being the murder on June 24th of 72-year-old James Lambert. I know we've talked about it in the past. Just to briefly go over it, 2100 block of Cecil B. Moore. There were about 7 juveniles out at 2:30 in the morning. They became involved in a verbal back and forth with Mr. Lambert that we know now. At some point, 2 14-year-olds, Richard Jones and another 14-year-old, Gamara Mosley, picked up a traffic cone and proceeded to hit Mr. Lambert. One of those blows caused Mr. Lambert to strike his head and was later pronounced. Both of those individuals were charged with murder and conspiracy in regards to that incident. Another incident that happened this period, homicide commander and investigators were reviewing cases. They came upon two cases, one that occurred on June 28th and another one that occurred on the 21st, on July 7th. Both cases involved individuals exiting SEPTA buses in the 35th District Northwest neighborhood of the city. They were walking along after they left the bus and were shot multiple times by an individual who fled the area at the time. All those victims were in their 20s, and the investigation led back to the SEPTA bus where, as I've talked about in the past, detectives were able to use technology and they were able to look at the video of the bus, and they happened to notice that the same passenger, besides our victims, is in the rear of the bus. He appears to be dressed in a work outfit. In one of the cases, he has a mask on. They followed those video, connected to some other video. The ballistics in the cases did connect very quickly, and they were able to develop a suspect, and the arrest occurred of Derrick Jones, 21-year-old male, on July 14th. That arrest yielded the recovery of a firearm, which matched all three homicides in this case. So he's been arrested and charged with murder in those cases. Another homicide case that ended with an arrest this period occurred back on June 21st, 4200 L Street. I've covered on a previous press conference where Laurie Nugent was taking a walk, 76-year-old male, 5:30 in the morning in his rear driveway. We've recovered video of that, and we have a male run up behind him, fire one time, and he's fatally shot while taking that walk. During the course of this week, the homicide did develop a suspect, a Wagner Tejada Pena, 24-year-old male. We put that out during the course of this week in Lawrence, Massachusetts. That male was stopped by police and arrested on July 14th. Recovered from him was a 9mm handgun while he was arrested. He's also been charged with 2 stabbing incidents while he's up in Massachusetts, and we are waiting for his extradition back to Philadelphia. We listed some fugitive photos in our press release. I just want to remind everyone that there is a $20,000 reward for an arrest and conviction in these homicide cases. So please, anyone with information should call our tip line, 215-686-TIPS or 8477. I want to briefly cover some of the shooting investigation groups activity during this period. There are a group that handles our non-fatal shootings that occurred during the course of this year. They started in February. They've made 11 arrests this period. They've also had 5 arrest warrants. One of the arrests that were made during the course of this week occurred on July 15th. We've seen the video that was released. 14-year-old offender gets off the SEPTA bus with another male, immediately becomes engaged in a verbal dispute with a 19-year-old victim that's standing on the platform. At one point, our 14-year-old very quickly pulls a handgun and fires 3 times, striking our victim. He was charged with aggravated assault, weapons violations, and related offenses. And the shooting investigations group warrants for several other individuals are going to be released as part of our release for this. Another case that I want to highlight that occurred over the weekend that the shooting investigation group needs your help on. It occurs on 7/16 at 4:30 in the afternoon, and this is a case where we have a lot of ballistic evidence to go through because of the amount of rounds that are fired in this case. It's really senseless and horrific. But on that afternoon at 4:30, we have 4 individuals standing on the sidewalk. And there is a video associated with this that I think they're going to play during the course of my explaining it. You'll see them standing on a sidewalk. They're located in the 1300 block of East Luzerne Street. There is a dark colored black GMC SUV. We believe it's a 2011 Yukon driving up the street. You're seeing that come down the street right now. 2 individuals wearing black clothing exit the passenger side and fire at least 27 rounds towards these individuals. Police do respond, and all of these individuals were taken to the hospital and are believed to will survive. We need help. If somebody knows that vehicle, we may know who the individuals are. Please take a look at it and give our tip line a call. Both males exit the passenger side. They're wearing dark clothing, and this vehicle is being driven by another individual, which we don't have images of. Any information on that, please give us a call. Another subject that I'm just going to approach before concluding my portion of this is to just mention that we are seeing an uptick again this year in carjackings. They're becoming very problematic, especially in certain areas. We have, in this year alone, we've made 218 arrests related to carjackings. 40% of those are juveniles that are arrested for these cases. We're doing everything we can to follow up the carjackings that have happened. It's very difficult because in many cases, even if we recover a vehicle, which we have over 61% of the vehicles either that were never taken or that we found and recovered, very difficult to link somebody back to the robbery. We need our victim to cooperate. We need to recover some forensic or video evidence to do that. So we're working very hard to move backwards to try to bring as many people to justice and make sure that they're held accountable for these incidents. 66% of these we notice have been happening when either the vehicle's parked or is about to park. So we're asking you to be very careful in our hotspots. Look for if you're hitting an ATM and you're parking, you're by yourself, be very careful of your surroundings because they're the type of areas that we're seeing the most of these carjackings. So we want you to be very careful, make sure it's a well-lit area. If it's not or something don't seem right, notify 911 and move to a different area. That's the advice that we have for you. Make sure that you use caution when you do it. Most of these carjackings are occurring. When we do our interviews, we're seeing that the carjackings happening to distracted people on their cell phones, people by themselves that are either reading something on a cell phone or not paying attention to what they're doing. So be very careful. Make sure that you have your phone on you. And if you're on your phone, you're being careful of your surroundings so that you know what's happening around you and you could respond accordingly. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Kevin. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief Inspector Venor, and to all our speakers. We will now move to Q&A for members of the press. And because of limited time, we ask that media outlets coordinate ahead of time and that one representative from each media outlet ask questions. Reporters are asked to limit their questions to 2 or fewer for this first round, and if we do have time, we'll go around for a second round. Our Spanish interpretation is not available at today's press briefing, but we will assist as needed offline, so you can always contact our office for any sort of translation needs that you have. If you would like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function under reaction. So with that, we'll go to Kelly Rule of Fox 29. Kelly?
My first question is for Mayor Kenny. I just wanted to ask about the kind of emotional and personal side of the number of homicides we've seen this year. Have you had an opportunity to sit down and talk to any of these families? Is that something that can happen? And can you talk about the conversations you've had with them, if that's something that you've been able to do?
I have not spoken specifically to families. I've spoken to folks who are involved in some of the officers involved in shootings, but have not spoken individually to people. Sometimes the investigation is in the offing, and it's difficult to interact with people when the investigation is going on. But no, I have not.
Do you think it'd be helpful for them to hear from you, even if you're saying what you're saying to us, that a lot of the reasons behind these shootings are things that you need the legislature to act on, but do you think it'd be helpful for them to hear from you?
Well, I mean, I have spoken to people who have been victims of shootings, but as far as the homicides are concerned, I don't know that it's productive that I intercede before or while the investigation is going on.
And Chief Ganor, just one quick question for you about the 18-year-old that was killed at 52nd last night. 50 shots fired, and that's a situation that we're seeing often now where people are opening fire. I think he was hit possibly 30 times. Do you guys have a motive or anything on this? And any comment on these shootings where people are shooting that many times?
Well, this case occurred about 9:50 last night, just before 10 o'clock. We know that we recovered at least 54 pieces of ballistics at that scene. We know there were 3 different weapons used. As far as a motive, I think it's too early. We're doing our best to try to find video and other evidence and some more witnesses to figure out. I mean, obviously, this individual was targeted for a reason. We just don't have that yet.
And there should never be a situation where 50 bullets could be fired from one gun. That's part of the problem that we're dealing with, is that the Second Amendment was written when it was a single shot muzzle loaded rifle to fight the British, not to kill people with 50 shots plus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Next up, we'll go to Ryan Hughes of CBS 3. Ryan.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I think of the homicides that we're seeing this year, about 10% are the victims are 18 and younger. And if you talk to a lot of folks out on the streets, they say these kids just have nothing to do. So what new investments are being put into place or in place right now? What resources are being looked into to be put into place to prevent kids from not only becoming victims, but also getting into trouble?
Hey, Ryan, I'll take that for you, Mayor. So one of the things for young people who are kind of under the age of 18, for their parents and them, there are a number of programs across the city through our Department of Human Services, our intensive prevention services. They are specifically for programs for young people under the age of 18 who are at a higher risk of engaging in dangerous behavior. These programs are centered in communities that are more vulnerable to gun violence and are free and open to youth and young adults. Additionally, there are a number of community organizations that we have funded through our community expansion grants that serve young people in vulnerable communities. I will highlight one of which is the Lighthouse. If you look at the work that is happening in the East Division in our Kensington area, that is one that is rebuilding the village, so to speak, and really connecting to those communities that have been impacted not just by gun violence, but also by the opioid epidemic, and giving them, young people, opportunities to have a safe haven. That was one of our funding priorities for the community expansion grants, was safe havens. And there are a number of those that are in our grantees that are doing amazing work in our communities, that have been doing amazing work in our communities, and that are open to families and young people. We would encourage you all as media to support the connection between those individuals that need them and the services that exist. Thank you.
Mayor, also, what is being done with the extra money from the soda tax, and is it being used for what it was originally intended for?
All the money from the soda tax is being used for pre-K and for rebuild. And that's what it was intended to do.
Okay, and I have one last question for the Chief Inspector. You highlighted one of those cases that we covered, I believe it was on Friday, with the arrest of Derrick Jones. At that press conference, it was asked, could there possibly be additional victims? Any new update on that? Has he been linked to any other crimes around the city?
We have not linked him yet to any other crimes. We're looking. We're not only looking in our city, but because SEPTA runs in the adjoining neighboring counties, we're making contact with them. We're even looking at cases where somebody may have been either shot at or followed and not shot at all, but we're just not seeing any connection yet to anything else.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Next up, we'll go to Kristen Johansson of KYW. Kristen?
Hello. Number one, I just want to see if you guys had an update on the, if you have any identifications coming in for the SEPTA sexual assault suspect.
So, yeah, we're working hard on that this morning, our special victims unit. We have received some tips. However, we are not there yet, so we're still asking the public, anybody with information. We released some photos yesterday. We're hoping that somebody may know this individual, give us a call. They are working on some information, but it's not vetted yet, not ready for release.
And then I don't know if this would be for the chief inspector or deputy commissioner, but can you talk about guns recovered? Specifically, is that when you put up those slides, is that BUFA arrests or is that just the guns that somebody finds on the street? And then how is your job, I want to say, changed from last year in that respect?
Okay, so in reference to the crime guns, that includes gun arrests as well, but that's the overall crime guns we recovered from the streets, whether it was arrest or not. It could be due to an investigation where, let's say, for example, our narcotics bureau issued a search warrant related to a case that they're focusing on, and they recovered 15 guns from that home. So that's part of the crime guns that you saw on the slides. That does not include the roof arrest, which were over 2,000 thus far at this time. In reference to would you say what's difference in comparison to last year?
Yeah, the reason I'm asking that is because I believe there was some case law that kind of has changed what you guys can do versus what you can't do. And just to preface this, the reason I'm asking that is because on the district attorney's data dashboard, it looks like it's about 30% down from gun possession cases. So I'm just wondering where the numbers, it may not be exactly like from last year.
So there are new case laws in place. I'd rather not educate those who are thinking about committing crimes, but there are new case laws in place that makes it challenging for police to actually recover guns from individuals who are possessing guns illegally.
So it's safe to say that you're recovering more guns maybe than last year, about the same amount of guns from last year. So maybe there's a little bit down on arrests because of that.
So as of right now, last year we reached an all-time high. Over 5,900 guns were recovered from our streets. If you combine last year with this year to date, you're looking at over 9,000 crime guns we recovered from our streets in Philadelphia. The numbers in comparison to last year, there were more last year, but we're still not too far behind from last year as far as crime guns being recovered from the streets. The pace we're on now, it looks like we may pass last year's number if we remain at this pace.
Okay, thank you so much. And I just want to mention again that I'd like to get off of Zoom because sometimes we do have these little follow-up questions for different public officials.
Thanks, Kristen. Next up, Miguel Martinez of Univision.
Hi, good morning. My first question is in regards to the curfew that is in effect in the city. Young people still seem to be involved in crime, violent crime. How confident are city officials and the police that this curfew will divert teens and young people from committing and becoming involved in crime? And anyone can answer, whoever has an answer to that question.
Erica?
Hey, Miguel, I think that what the curfew does, one is it provides an opportunity for us as a community to know where our kids are. And really kind of rebuild that connective tissue in neighborhoods to take care of one another. I think our curfew centers are evening resource centers that have also been set up by the Department of Human Services in our neighborhoods, provide an opportunity for for families and kids to be connected to people who can support the communities and support those individuals. I'll highlight one of their newer ones, a community compassion in Cobbs Creek. It's really about if parents are working 2 and 3 jobs and don't have the ability to have childcare, and you have kids who do kids things and sneak out, it's a way to provide community support. And when you have young people connected to positive programming, positive individuals, again, safe havens. I can't stress the importance of them enough. You find that they are less likely to get engaged in nefarious activities or be less vulnerable to violence. And so what the curfew can do, what we are hoping that the data shows us, is that allows for an opportunity for families to connect to supports that they need for older youth.
I spoke with a representative from one of those resource centers last week, a week after the time for the curfew was changed, and she told me that no teen or no young people have been taken to the resource center as of a week after the time changed. So how confident are you that this will work?
I'm confident if it works, if people tell people that it exists. And so there is an opportunity here in this dialogue, and thank you for asking the question about the curfew. It's we have to connect folks to these opportunities. If you see little Kevin down the street hanging out and it's 10 o'clock at night, offer to buy him something to eat, walk him to the curfew center. There are ways that we can do this and connect young people to these services and supports, and without it having to be a law enforcement intervention. And so I think that we have to uplift these opportunities for kids to engage in places where they will have meaningful supervision and connection to services, and it not be totally reliant on the cops dropping them off, but it also be an opportunity for kids to engage in positive programming and behavior change.
Thank you. I have one more question. Is in regards, children and women are frequently figured in reports the police send out. Is there a difference this year for this trend? I don't know if someone have.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Miguel?
Yes, children and women are more frequently figured in the police report that are sent out. Why is this happening more often now?
I think that I will comment first, and then I'll send it to DC Dales or somebody else from the police department. What we have been seeing since the beginning of the pandemic, particularly as it relates to women, is an uptick in domestic violence as it relates to not just shootings, but other domestic incidents. This is where our conversation about legislation on the state level and the reduction of access to guns is really critical and important to save lives of families. And we cannot ignore that the pressure cooker that has been the last 3 years that has made it more dangerous for individuals in their homes that were already experiencing domestic violence. I would recommend that anybody that is feeling that has been victimized and doesn't feel safe to connect with any of our victim services agencies and organizations like Women Against Abuse, and we have our own domestic violence office within the city of Philadelphia. DC Dales or anyone else that you want to comment?
Pretty much covered it. Did she answer your question?
Yes, for the most part, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Miguel. Next up, we'll go to Isabel Sanchez of Telemundo.
Hello, everyone. This is not necessarily gun violence related, but I don't know if anybody from PPD has any information on a hit and run that happened on Haverford and 50th last night. Any leads? And if any updates on the state of the woman? I know she was listed in critical earlier today.
The information that went out originally is all I still have. I don't have an updated condition. I know that they were struck attempting to cross the street. There were 2 children and the adult. I think the adult is in worse condition. I believe the children are stable. But I'll make sure that we send through public affairs an update a little later.
And if there's an updated description of the vehicle or anything, we'll appreciate that.
Very good.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Isabel. Next up, we'll go to Sam Searles of WHYY.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So my question is, I'm not sure who's the best to answer this. It's specifically about the city grants for community investment, specifically about what you're doing for the round 5 grants to make sure that the distribution is faster than we saw for round 4. Since there were a lot of community partners who were saying that the money hadn't been coming in as fast as they needed it to.
Sure, Sam. So one of the things that we've done is specifically for the targeted community investment grants. The community expansion grants are grants from $100,000 to $1 million. Our targeted community investment grants are from $1,500 to $50,000. We're talking about the targeted community investment grants. We've done a number of things to ensure that we are reducing the barriers to folks accessing the grant funds. The first is that we've broken up the grants into three payments, very similar to a traditional grant model. And so from the gate, people will receive a third of the funds. In the middle of the grant cycle, they will receive the second third, and then at the end, they will receive the final amount of the funds. We are also looking at revising some of the reimbursement policies within our fiduciary. And so we will continue to, and last thing is that we're utilizing technology to reduce the barriers of submission for receipts in the reports. And so we are continuing to support our grantees to reduce the onerous nature of the reporting and the documentation, so they can just be worried about fulfilling the programming of the grants. And so know that is top of mind and something we are continuing to work on to reduce those barriers and make it more equitable for our grantees and community organizations.
Thank you so much. That was all I had.
Kevin, real quick, is Christian Johansson still on?
Yes, she is.
Kristen? I just wanted to clarify something for her. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, we'll circle back with on a second round too. Next up, Chris Palmer of the Inquirer. Chris.
Hi, thank you. I just want to follow up on something that was asked earlier of Mayor Kenny, just to make sure to clarify. So you haven't had a chance to meet with any relatives of any of the 300 homicide victims in the city this year, is that right?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
I said, so I just want to clarify, you haven't had a chance to meet with any relatives of any of the 300 people who have been killed in the city this year, is that right?
Not specifically. I may have had conversations with them without, no, there's been no specific meeting set up.
And is that typical compared to past years, or is
I've never met with any families in almost 7 years in that regard. I've met with some children who have been shot, little babies who have been shot in crossfire. I've met with their families, but it's not something that I've done from the time that I started being mayor. I don't know if any mayor has done
that. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll now open it up for a second round. I saw, Kristen, that you noted that you are still here. So DC Dells, did you want to clear something up?
Yeah, Kristen, real quick, I mentioned we had over 2,500 VUF arrests. So that was, to make sure that this is perfectly clear, that was for the total for last year. As of right now, year to date, we're over 1,300, a little over 1,300.
For VUFA arrests?
Yes, yep.
Okay, got it. So it's about, you would say it's about the same as last year?
Last year, around this time, we were at a little over 1,500.
Okay.
All right.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you both. Seeing the time, we will open it up for a second round of questions if reporters have anything additional. So I see, Isabel, was your hand still raised from before, or did you have an additional question?
I do have an additional question also for PPD. There was the case of a woman found with an injury and exposed in a park in Germantown. I don't know if there's any more details or more information. I know it was being investigated as a homicide.
At this point, we're waiting for the medical examiner's determination of what the cause and manner of death was. At this point, it's not apparent, so we have to wait. So it's still an open investigation.
Is it investigated as a homicide, suspicious death?
Well, we wouldn't know until the ME rules the cause and manner of death. So we'll have to wait to see what transpired before we can investigate. So it is being investigated by detectives, though.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Isabel. Next, we'll go to Miguel Martinez of Univision again. Miguel?
Yes, I have one more question. It's in regards to the case of Alisa Morales, the women's found burned alive in Kensington back in June. Has there been any update?
So detectives are working very hard on this case. I spoke with the sergeant just recently. There is a person of interest. It's a female that we believe sprayed Mrs. Morales with some type of liquid, and she was set on fire. We don't have a name. We have a image that we're trying to enhance, and we may release that to the public. There's a chance that I'm told they're going to upgrade Mrs. Morales and try to bring her out of her coma state. So if she's able to provide us with more information, it'd be very helpful. So they are working on the case, but we just developed some images at some distance away from the scene, but we believe it's the same person, but they're still working on the case.
There's still no motive or you haven't figured out all those details yet.
We don't have that until we're able to speak to her and find the other individual that we believe was burned in the incident that we haven't identified yet.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. Next, we'll go to Ryan Hughes of Channel 3.
And this is just to follow up with the mayor in regards to the surge in the violence, specifically focusing on the young people being involved. Mayor, what's the biggest difference, would you say, between what we're seeing today and when you first took office regarding the numbers of the violence and the numbers of young people being involved?
Access to guns. I mean, it's a nationwide epidemic. The pandemic created many situations where people felt like they needed to obtain a firearm. In Pennsylvania, unlike New Jersey or New York or California, it's very easy to obtain a firearm. You and I could drive up to Bucks County this weekend, come and probably buy a bag of guns and sell them out of the trunk of my car. And that's the major problem. I mean, when I was 15 years old, I never saw a gun, let alone had the ability to access one. And again, as I said before, we're the most armed nation in world history, and we're one of the least safe.
And then how do you respond to those residents when you're talking about some of these cases where there's 50 plus shots that are being fired? Bullets are ending up on their lawns, in their homes, in their cars. When they say they're frustrated and they're fed up and they're tired of it, how do you respond to that?
They need to change their legislature and make sure we have a governor and a legislature that will protect us, or at least give us as a city the ability to protect ourselves. When the legislature systematically removes our ability to protect our own residents intentionally, there's something really wrong with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Any final questions from anyone else on the group? Reporters? All right, seeing none, that will conclude today's press briefing. And thank you all for joining. We'll reconvene again in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.